Grab your cup of coffee. Sit down for a story. Let's all go exploring. Making it after 40. Making it after 40. Making it after 40.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Making It After 40 podcast. I am your host, Lisa Rodriguez. I am an actor and writer who is still trying to make it after the age of 40. On this show, we explore what it means to be an artist trying to make it as a middle-aged person. This week's guest is Emily Ziff Griffin. Emily is a writer who started her career as a producer, producing films with Philip Seymour Hoffman. In her mid-30s, Emily finally accepted that she actually wanted to be the one creating the stories and found the courage to write her first novel, Light Years. Emily's approach to creativity is super interesting, and she does talk in depth about her process in this conversation, but essentially her novel was born out of her experience of losing her father to AIDS when she was almost 14 years old. I think you all are really going to love Emily's approach to writing and to hear how she continues to grow and learn and try out new ways of writing, whether that's joining a writer's room for a television show, coaching with other writers, and writing for various mediums, such as being an author, an essayist, and screenwriter. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And with that, let's get to the show. Okay, so today on the show, I have Emily Ziff Griffin. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Hi. Emily is a writer, a screenwriter, and a fiction writer. You have a fiction novel. And from everything that I've gathered, you started your career as a producer.
Correct.
And had a long producing relationship with Philip Seymour Hoffman, which is really magical and awesome.
Yes, indeed it was.
Yeah. You were on Leonora's podcast last week. That came out last week. And I've been dying to listen to it, but I was like, oh, I don't want to listen to it. And then I get all the information and then I don't ask the questions for this one. So
yeah, totally. I mean, it's so funny. I'm on a weird podcast world tour right now because I did hers. And then yesterday I did a podcast about raising cinephiles, like how to sort of parent future film lovers. And now I'm here with you. So it's like, I don't know, all of a sudden I'm like I'm just like on a podcast bender. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fun.
It's wonderful. I love all of these conversations. There's so many kind of brilliant women. It feels like, carving out these spaces to talk to other brilliant women. And it's just really wonderful.
Yeah. I think there's so much good out there and now to me feels like a really good time for our voices to be heard and to share and
completely. Yeah. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. So why don't we just start with, I'm going to have you give us a little bit of background on how you got to where you're at now with, we'll get into it because the other thing that I think is really interesting and exciting is the script that you're developing based on your essay about your dad and going on the cruise. And I don't know, as I was preparing for this, I was looking at your website and I was reading all about you, and I was looking at your coaching that you do for artists, and that sounds really magical. You do for teenagers and for adults. So I want to get into it as much as we can in our hour. But yeah. Why don't you give us your little story? I'll stop talking.
I'm going to give the short version because I did sort of give Leonora the very long version. And we really went through my whole career, which, I don't know how interesting it is. But that's really what we talked about. So, the short version is that I went into producing essentially because I was really interested in filmmaking and storytelling, but I did not have the courage to consider myself a writer, director, artist. I really just did not feel that I had the right to claim that identity. I didn't really have a point of view about sort of what I wanted to say in the world. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I really was not fully connected to my authentic self at the age of, 22 when I came out of college. and a lot of that was because of my dad dying when I was a teenager. And that, just, I think froze me a little bit in terms of being, in touch with my feelings and able to just like fully connect to other people and things like that. So producing felt like a very safe way to kind of be part of making things. I really loved making things all through high school and college. I loved that, but I was afraid to take complete and total ownership of that. Producing felt like a sort of safe way to do that. And I was very fortunate that a series of jobs and events and things led me to working with Philip Seymour Hoffman, initially as his assistant. And we just formed like a very close relationship very quickly. And we worked really well together. And we really, I was able to really support him in what he was trying to do as an artist. And that sort of blossomed or mushroomed into starting a company together. And we had that company for about 10 years. And we produced a handful of films, and we developed a ton of projects, and all the sort of highs and lows of that journey, which was incredible, and it was like grad school, on like, steroids and crack and everything you could learn. It was tremendous in terms of what I learned and how I then started to think about, well, what is my ultimate destiny as a creative person? And I, over time started to realize it really wasn't producing, at least not exclusively. I still have my hand in producing, and I have a sort of ambivalent relationship with it. There are things about it that I love, and it's hard for me to not wear that hat, even when I am in the writer's chair. But there are people who are better at it than I am. So I feel like it's, I'm happy to to have that kind of partnership with the people who are truly great producers, because I don't feel that I am one of them. But so I realized, that I wanted to be a writer, and it took a long time to have the courage to know that, and then to start to say that to people. And I really made a choice to write a novel as my first kind of attempt at writing.
Oh, wow.
Sounds nuts. And it was nuts. It was totally nuts. But it was really, in a lot of ways, a reaction to the film business, which requires so many people to give you permission to make something, right? You can't make a movie just by yourself. I mean, you can, but it's really hard. That's a whole other thing. And so I felt like if I wrote a book, then I would have a finished work of something, and I could control that destiny entirely. And I had a lot of help in writing my novel. I had so many different people along the way who helped me. But at the end of the day, it was up to me if it was going to get finished or not. And it was up to me if, what it ended up being was ultimately in my hands. And that was so enticing. It was so compelling. And it really catalyzed my my discipline and my willingness to just do the work, to get it done.
Yeah.
And it felt in a way like life or death, like I was like, by that point, by the time I was really working on that, Phil had passed away. I had really concluded that I did not want to produce full time. I had a second child on the way. My husband and my then 2-year-old daughter and I, like 7 months pregnant, moved to Los Angeles. And it was kind of like, I have to make this work. I always think of the Eminem song where it's like, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, that was really my reality. It was like, I had to make a career as a writer work. Just like, put all my eggs in that basket. And I wrote a novel, and I was very fortunate to be able to ultimately get it published. It didn't occur to me also, I didn't know, this is a helpful thing. I didn't know that you could write a novel and not have it get published until I was like a good ways into it. And I remember going to a panel of authors, an author I grew up with named Ivy Pacoda, who's an amazing writer. And she was on this panel of authors. And I went to this talk, and they were all chatting. And, one of them started talking about the the first two novels that they wrote that didn't get published. And I was literally like, wait, what? Like, I don't, that, like, I did not know that was possible. I thought if you actually wrote a book, somebody would publish it. Like, that was just a given in my frame of mind. So I think that's kind of funny because I do, it's like ignorance is bliss or whatever. It just, I think I was able to do it because I was so not clear on the realities. So then from there, I've really just been able to keep going, in different forms and different media. And I've had, I then have studied writing more intentionally. I don't have a graduate degree, but I have studied, with teachers and to learn the craft. And
did you have to do that when tackling your first novel? Or did you just kind of do that on your own?
I had these two women who were sort of book packagers who had come into working with me on the novel very early. And they were sort of like my producers. They were like book producers, and so they were really helpful in sort of guiding what the book became. And then and they had a professional editor that they worked with who gave me notes on the first couple drafts of the book. And then it was like really just relying on, I have a lot of relationships because I've been doing that, at that point I've been in a creative field for 15 plus years. And so I could reach out to people and be like, can you read this? Can you give me notes? And so I got a lot of notes from a lot of people. And then my husband's aunt is actually a professor of creative writing, although I think she's just now kind of stepped into sort of semi-retirement. But she's a published novelist. She's an amazing writer and teacher. Her name is Rosemary Graham. And I feel like her notes on one of my drafts were like, oh, wow. Like that was like, there were like a couple points where it was like leveling up in terms of my craft. And I feel like she really helped kind of teach me how to write fiction. And there were just a bunch of people along the way, that were sort of formative in teaching me by just reading what I'd written and giving me notes. So that was pretty great. And then, I just have been, in the 5 years since I published the book, really just working on my craft and working on different mediums, learning how to write essays. And I, was fortunate to be in a writer's room on a television show and, now writing screenplays. And I love it. I love it. It makes me happy.
What do you think was the turning point for you where you decided that you knew that you actually wanted to be creating the stories and not just producing the stories? Was losing Philip Seymour Hoffman, was that part of it? Or was it having kids or just aging in general?
All of it. I think, certainly him relapsing and using drugs and then ultimately dying, that was a big part of it, just because for so long my kind of identity and my work was so kind of tied up with him that it was hard to, once it wasn't, it was kind of like, okay, now there's a freedom to think about what I want that wasn't really there before because I was so intertwined with his creative life. Definitely having children. I feel like definitely having my daughter. She's 11. So this was 2012 that she was born. I was 34 or turning 34 that year. And that was a big game changer because, it's like you suddenly start to think about, well, who am I going to be to this person? As she grows up, what are the things that I want to carry forward? You start to think about legacy, in certain ways. And I I think there was just a very clear impulse inside me to make things that I had really, figured out ways to ignore, to sort of quiet, and really just because of fear. And I always sort of think like the fear at some point, the desire to make the thing got louder than the fear, and there was just a point where they sort of switched places and it became palatable to me. I became willing to try,
Yeah. I can relate to that. I had a little bit of that with this podcast where I sat on the idea for a long time, and then finally it was just like, no, I have to start it. I have to make it. I think other people, I can relate to what you said also about like not being your most authentic self, and definitely same thing. I think for a lot of 20-year-olds, you're not your most authentic self, or somewhere along the way you get lost. And I think now, like, especially as I traveled through my 30s and got to 40, I really started to find my voice again, and just thought, if not now, then when? Might as well be now.
I mean, and so much of it is the culture, right? It's I mean, I remember also around that time being exposed to a writer named Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Do you know her work?
I don't.
She's incredible. She wrote a very sort of iconic book called Women Who Run with the Wolves, and she's a Jungian psychoanalyst, I guess, but also an expert on myth and story, from storytelling from all different cultures, all around the world, all different times. She's this sort of incredible weaver of tales and scholar of storytelling. And she writes a lot about how the culture tries to sort of rob us of our creative power. It really tries to deny us our creative power, particularly women. But all of us, like, we all are born creative beings. And then at a certain point, there starts to be this sort of hierarchy and this sort of judgment around, well, that's not a good representation of a tree, so therefore you're not talented, so therefore you shouldn't paint, so therefore you have to go and do something else. And her work was really influential for me in just going like, oh, wait a second, I do have this stuff inside of me, and it's okay to try to express it. And it's like, and it's not my imagination that it's been kind of suppressed, and so that was very liberating for me. It really allowed me to gain confidence.
That's wonderful. I think also for me, there was like a perfectionist mindset and like not wanting to fail. And so then never trying, because I didn't want to look dumb if I failed, or like I didn't want to be judged if it was bad.
Totally.
Yeah. Now it's like, it's okay if it's bad. If nobody's good the first time around.
Right. Well, how do you get better? And I think, as a parent, you start to understand that lesson, right? You're telling them all the time, you have to work at something until you learn it, until you can be proficient, until you can be expert. Like nothing comes, most of us don't come to things instantly and automatically. I'm constantly telling my children that. So it has to also apply to us.
Yeah. And I think it's a great lesson and a great, we can be great role models to our children when we show them that, like, hey, sometimes we fail, sometimes it doesn't come out great. Yeah. That's been fun. My oldest is 13, and he's starting to realize, like, oh, you have a good podcast, Mom. People actually listen to it. Oh, okay. And so now he's like trying to help me find guests. He's like, oh, there's one of the kids in my school. His dad is a YouTuber. You should contact him and see if he'll be on your show. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. I think it's also, they can become wonderful advocates too. I will have like rough days where I'm trying to, someone will pass on my project, or I'll get some sort of disappointing news. And, my daughter's like the first one to be like, you're such a great writer. Everyone's going to, like, don't worry. People are going to
Aw.
want to do your movies. Like, I'm always like, oh, good. Okay. I feel better. Thank you.
Are your kids old enough to have read your novel?
My daughter she's read part of it. She's
Okay.
she's a little young for it.
Yeah.
She did read a big chunk of it earlier this school year. And I think she just, she was trying to read it for school, and they have a reading log that they have to do. So they read every night, and then in the morning they go into school and they have to write up some comments about what they've read the night before. She was like, there's just so much description and nothing happens. And so I don't know what to write in the reading log, because I'm just like, it's like a whole page where she's like describing like, the color of the glass on the building. And I was just like, okay. So so far it sort of has not landed with her, but I think it will in a couple more years. I think she's, it's really meant for high schoolers. Yeah, I have to give it another chance.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but it sounds really interesting. And based on what I read on your website, is that it was inspired by going through the loss with your dad.
Yes.
And I'm curious about how, because you said, you lost your dad when you were so young, when you're just before you turned 14. And so then obviously as an adult, it sounds like you've been able to process it a little bit more. And I'm wondering how that informed your creativity and finding your voice in that regard.
Yeah, I didn't really process it at all at the time. And so that's been like a big journey. And the book is it's really about like that bigger journey of mine. Like it's a very fictionalized telling of my own experience, right? Which is that over time I had to kind of understand the power of my emotional self, my creative self. And that's like sort of what this character has to go through. And she's experiencing that in a much, more rapid and sort of condensed journey and time period. In the book sort of deals with the pandemic. Oddly, it was written, years before COVID, but really has a lot of uncanny resemblances to what we've just been through. It's kind of a wild thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So she, I think everything that I make comes from me in some way, shape, or form. And that's really something that I learned to do from working with Phil, because he really found ways to identify and relate to every character he played. He personalized his performances in a very specific ways and in very deep ways. And I just kind of gleaned over time that that's how you do it, and it's certainly not how everyone does it, but it's how he did it. And it's become how I do it. And that doesn't mean that anything that most of the things that I've written, even the screenplay that's based on my essay, it's very distant in certain ways from my experience. It's fictionalized, but the emotional essence is all true. And that's what I'm always looking to do, even if I'm writing something about, MI6 spies. Like I'm still looking for, where do I connect to these characters emotionally? How is their journey similar to a journey that I've experienced emotionally, in terms of relationships, in terms of, self-actualization, things like that. So even the stories that look nothing like my life are very, very personal to me.
Yeah, that's a really neat approach. I like that, because I think it does feel really natural to pull from your own life when you're creating stories. Of course, it doesn't have to be spot on, but I think that's really all that we can do, is pull from our own experiences and transpose that into the characters.
Yeah. People always say that. They say, write what you know. And I just think it's sort of about just going a little bit deeper with that, and not necessarily, that doesn't mean that you have to write a memoir, or
Right.
you have to like tell the literal story of your life. It just means that you have to understand the story from a very personal place. I think that, or you don't have to, but I've found that for me, that's the only way I know how to do it. I don't know how to do it another way. And I think the most resonant stories that we love tend to have some element of that.
Yeah. Well, then they feel more authentic as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think what I'm finding is that the more specific you get, the more relatable it is, which is kind of odd because you think that if you
Right.
were more vague, but the reality is we all have so many shared experiences, and whether or not it's the exact situation, those feelings.
That's right.
What it feels like to be in a breakup. You know what it feels like to lose someone close to you. You know what it feels like to be a kid and like be disappointed by your parents, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it may not be the exact parent or the exact disappointment, but
That's right.
that feeling is those general feelings are so common.
That's absolutely right. And I think, I have a teacher named Joan Shekel who talks about, emotions as like paint colors, but she also talks about like, you don't want a muddy brush. Like if you're painting with blue, you have to be very clear about what color blue you're using, right? You're not, there's a difference between navy blue and azure blue and royal blue and, sky blue. Like there's just a million different types. And so and that level of specificity is what actually, if you take a brush with brown paint and dip it in your blue paint and try to do the sky, it's going to look, gonna look pretty. And so I think when you feel an emotion in a story land from that very clear, specific place that you're talking about, that's what allows another person to feel it, because it's unmistakably that. And we've all felt royal blue, we've all felt disappointment, right? Which is different from despair, right? Even though you could classify them both under the umbrella of sadness, so it's like, I think it's a really important way of understanding why stories connect to us. And it does have a lot to do with being really, really clear and specific about what colors you're painting with,
Yeah. And is this, it sounds like this is kind of the approach you take with your workshops, is going in and teaching people how to access those, maybe, I don't know if you would call them core memories, but memories from childhood, and pulling from their own experiences.
Yes.
Is that
yes.
okay.
Yeah. So I sort of do two things. I have a workshop that I teach, which is really designed, yes, to take kind of core memories and then work with the emotion at the root of them, and use that emotion to then drive fictional storytelling. It's a step-by-step process to do exactly what we were just talking about, which is to say, as a teenager, I felt, let's say I felt alienated. I am going to create a fictional story from a point of alienation, from that as my jumping off point, as opposed to, as a teenager, I lived in a mountain town and went skiing every weekend, right? Like that's
yes,
off point, right? So one is more of a narrative jumping off point, and one is more of an emotional jumping off point. And I think, and so the workshop is designed to illuminate how you can build story from emotion that you've experienced, that intimately well, because it's a feeling that you've had at a specific time in your life. And so first you kind of write through that time in your life to really identify, okay, well, what was the feeling at the root of that memory that I return to all the time? And once you really lock into what that emotion is, then you use that to catalyze a story. And it's just a different way of thinking about how to begin to write, because most of us come from like, oh, I need an idea about a plot, right? Or a character. And those are also important elements, but this is sort of just designed to come at it from a slightly different direction. And it's really amazing what people generate. It feels a little bit like a magic trick, when you do it, because people are like, oh wow, I didn't expect, like, where did that come from? And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That is a really cool thing. It reminds me of, there was in an improv class that I did, one of our teachers had us create characters by just focusing on a part of the body. So like, your character leads with their elbow or, their hips or whatever it was. And then based on that, like, you kind of created this character. And it was really interesting to just approach it in a different way. Yeah.
I have to try that. That's really wild. I love that. When I work with people one-on-one, it's very different. That's more about understanding what they're trying to do, or sort of where their impulses are taking them. And, I always feel like it's like part therapy and then part writing class. 'Cause it's really about kind of pushing people to get clear and honest about why they want to tell the story they're telling, and sort of what is at the root of it for them personally, and then figuring out how to build a story from that place. And that's, also, it's also feels like magic sometimes, because, people sometimes know they want to tell a story, but they think they know why. But then once they go a little deeper, they sort of unlock some things that, can be really powerful and exciting, and so that can be really fun.
Because if you know your why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can withstand.
If you know your why, it changes everything. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's, again, I think also the stories that are most resonant are written from that clarity. It's like when people know what the story is really about, it tends to work better, right? I mean, on a thematic level, when they understand what the story is designed to say about the human condition, those stories tend to land more, because again, they're clear and they're specific, and there's a kind of confidence, or really just a clarity, I guess, that helps the story connect to other people.
Well, even just you saying this, that's really giving me something to go back to with some things that I've been working on. Because I feel like there are definitely times when you have a story that you want to tell, but it's just not coming out quite right. Or you're like kind of stuck. And then, just the idea of drilling down into the why, asking yourself that question. Yes. What is it you're actually, that, I don't know why I haven't thought of that before. That's, of course, it seems so simple and obvious now that you say it.
Yeah, it's just, I think they don't think people teach that so much. They don't, I don't know. I've never been to film school. I mean, my undergraduate film program was very not Hollywood cinema. It was all weird experimental stuff. But I don't know if they probably do teach it in some way, shape, or form. But I learned that from Phil. I learned that from he was always kind of interrogating the meaning behind the story and trying to understand the themes and what is this really about? That's the question that we kept always asking, like, why are we telling the story and what is it about? And it's essential. But yeah, I don't know if people stop to think about it so much. I think they get worried about, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And that feels like enough for a lot of writers. And
let me ask you then about your experience in the writers' rooms, because, they always say, like, if you're a writer, you have to start so young, but obviously you didn't start writing until you got into your 30s. And how has that been for you, like, coming into it now?
Well, I was very fortunate. I've only had one writer's room experience, and it was really because I was blessed by a friend and a writer who I deeply admire, who invited me to be a writer on a show that she was creating. And so um, I sort of like got in the back door a little bit, which is a blessing.
Yeah.
And
So,
I loved that experience. It was a
mhm.
really I felt I definitely felt intimidated by it. I definitely felt like I don't know how to do this, but it was a small room. It was only a few folks. And so everyone was very welcoming, and it was I think different from what I gather, some writers room experiences are, where it's like 10 or 15 people and it's super competitive and everyone's trying to like have the next best idea. Like it was not that vibe at all. It was really warm and kind of just joyful experience to create a story. And I really learned. I mean, I learned, I hope I also contributed, but I feel like mostly I just got to learn, how to make a television show,
Yeah.
beat by beat, step by step. That was really illuminating. And the other writers were all very experienced and smart and creative. And so just sort of, absorbing that,
Hmm.
was a very wonderful experience. And I'd like to do it again. I don't know. I go back and forth about it because
Yeah.
I also, I don't know if it's the way that I work best.
Mm.
I tend to work, I don't know. And maybe this is also just my fear, but I tend to feel like I work best, like when I can go off and really think about something and kind of let it come through me. And so it's harder for me on the spot to be
Mm.
as brilliant as I would like, or as creative even as I would like. So I don't know. I will have to see if I end up having another chance to explore that. But I
Yeah.
tend to also like to do my own stuff. That's the other thing I've started to realize too. It's like I kind of just like to do my own stuff.
Yeah.
It
But I mean, like you said, it was a good experience. You got to have that
was
experience.
great.
And it's
It was
probably important for you to explore that to kind of know what direction you want to go and how you want to take your career from here.
absolutely. I mean, no, I cannot overstate um, what a great learning opportunity it was, on so many levels.
I did a pilot writing class meant like I don't know 2018. Yes, it was 2018. And I loved it so much because the teacher ran it like a writer's room
Oh,
in
that's
that
cool.
yeah, each person would kind of get to pitch a little on the everybody's pilots and I loved it so much. I was like, "Oh, this is what I want to do. I want to be in a room." I want to because I do love the collaboration in that regard. In some ways, I like writing my own stuff, but I sometimes have a hard time getting going. And what I love about being in that kind of environment is like offering notes and pitching on other people's stuff.
Yeah, I somehow wonder if it's like people who like team sports versus like they want to play tennis. I don't know.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. I was on a soccer team for many years, so that could be
yeah,
it.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know. I'm also an only child, so I'm like used to just being alone and not sharing and being kind of a weirdo in my own little world. You know?
Fair
Um,
enough. Yeah.
but I mean, it's like, again, I think it's just, I'm pretty sure mostly my aversion, if I'd even call it that, which I think is way too strong a word, is just the fear of like not being as good as everybody else. I think
Yeah.
that's pretty clearly likely to be the case.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's hard. It's hard when you go into like, especially when you're in a room full of brilliant people and you're like, I don't want to be the dum dum who comes up with an idea and the whole room goes silent because they don't know what to say.
You're just like, oh my God, who's this
Yeah,
idiot?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you look forward to as you continue to grow and age into your career?
Well, I mean, I really want to make this movie. based on my essay. I just am super passionate about that right now and working really hard to make that happen. I want to direct. I feel like increasingly that is like on the like horizon. I don't know how close the horizon is. It feels like it's very far away still, but it's there. It's out there. I can see it. And a lot of that is honestly in the same way that I felt like, oh, I have to write the book, it's like, I'm in this situation now with the script where I'm like trying to find the right director.
Yeah.
And it's hard, it's hard to have the stars align in that way. And so part of me is just like, if I can do it myself, then it's like one less person that has to say yes to me, and I just think I'm always interested in learning stuff, like I really like being a student and I like going down rabbit holes of new things. Like, I think I posted that I went to this yoga nidra class or meditation Zoom with another mom in our mom group.
Yes. You're inspiring me because I see when she posts it and I never make time for it. And I saw your post today. I was like, I really need to make time for this.
I've been in the same boat. I mean, this is a mom in our mom group who teaches yoga nidra, and which is like yogic sleep. Basically, it's you don't have to move your body at all. You just listen to this kind of meditation. And I've been wanting to do it, and I always see her offering it. And like this, I don't know, for whatever reason, on Tuesday night, I was like, I'm doing it. I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah.
And it was extraordinary. It was so amazing. And now I'm like obsessed with like learning about what yoga nidra is. And I don't know, I'm like going deep to it because I just want to learn about it. And I really enjoy that experience of like just something new and learning. And so I sort of feel like there's a directing piece for me on the horizon at some point. I'd love to write another book, and I've started to do that. I've started to do that a couple times. I think more in earnest recently. I have a sense of what it is I want to do, and so just more and more. Like I'm constantly working on things. I find it very hard. I have no shortage of ideas or things that I want to do.
Yeah.
So I hope that continues. It feels like it could or it couldn't, it feels like so mysterious. It's like, where did they come from? I don't know where they come from. They just come, they show up, and I hope they continue to show up.
Yeah.
For a long, long time.
Sometimes they come in dreams. You never know, right?
They do absolutely come in dreams. I've definitely had, I get a lot of ideas when I'm driving.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Like where I work out like a lot of stuff for some reason. Either if I'm listening to music, but sometimes just driving. It's like it relaxes your mind just enough that you can't be fully, or I guess it focuses your mind enough on something, kind of mundane. Like it's this weird liminal state where you have to pay attention, but you don't have to like give yourself completely, like you can kind of space out and your mind can wander a little bit. I don't know. There's just something about driving that I think that just like frees up the brain in like a specific way. It allows you to be creative.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I've had that too. That something just finally comes to you. What do they call it? Is that the beta state or beta? Maybe beta is too relaxed. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure there is like science around it.
Yeah.
It's some weird thing where like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to wrap it up, but I'm just worried about this whole, like we're cutting in and out. So I'm going to jump to my last two questions that I always ask people. Actually, I don't know. Did you want to share more about your essay that you published for the New Yorker or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just mention it. It's an essay I wrote for the New Yorker, and it's a sort of a a personal history. It's in their personal history section,
Yeah.
and it's about going on a gay cruise with my dad when I was a
Mm-hmm.
teenager, barely a teenager, in the early 1990s. And my father, who was gay, was also dying of AIDS at the time. And so we went on this kind of wild, amazing Caribbean cruise for a week. And it's just sort of, to me, just kind of a love letter to that time and that place and that community and the dance floor, the gay dance floor, and sort of what that meant to me. And yeah, and so I've adapted that into a film.
Yeah.
That's loosely, I mean, there's some departures from the real story, but it's at its
Right.
core, really about sort of gay joy and the sort of power of that community, even in the midst of such devastating loss.
Yeah. I remember when you shared that article, that essay, in our mom's group, and I read it, and I was really touched by it. It's a really beautiful essay, and it's a really beautiful tribute to your dad
Thank
and
you.
to the community. It was really touching how, like, it just seemed like everybody that was there with you just kind of lifted you up. They're like, yeah, this 13-year-old girl, yeah, we're gonna have fun and party with your dad.
No, they really did. They really embraced me, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
touching.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I will link it. I imagine people can probably still find
Yep.
it. So I'll link the essay, and people, you should go check it out. You should check out Emily's book as well. But before we go, I want to ask you, what advice would you have to anyone who is maybe just coming up in their art, their chosen profession now, or maybe they're choosing to make a leap and change career as a middle-aged
Oh my
person?
God, do it. That's my advice. Just fucking do it, because you're here. You're here, and it's not too late to do it. Like, it's so in your grasp to do it, and it's essential. I think I waited a long time. I feel like I said this maybe in one of the other interviews, but like it feels like I feel like I like had to come out of the closet myself, as an artist. Like, it really
Yeah.
was like that dramatic for me in terms of like how hard it was. And it can be done. And it's so worth it. Like, what's on the other side of that courageous choice to really claim what it is you want to be doing in this one and precious life that you have, this one wild and precious life that you have. It's like, it's so
Yeah.
worth it
Yeah.
to own that and to be in pursuit of it. And people say this, but I think it's true. I do think that the universe rewards that, and it kind of rises up to meet you as you make those bold choices. Just fucking do it.
I would agree with that. I think even just making the choice to put myself out there and be seen. One of the things that I kind of worked on a lot with myself over these last years, trying to get the courage to do something like this, was getting over this like fear that was installed in me from when I was a kid of being seen. And once you kind of get past that, you start putting yourself out there, like, it's really starting to get rewarded. The podcast keeps picking up more and more. And then I just had this Andy Crocker, who's also in our group, was like, hey, Voyage magazine, talk to this lady, do a little piece on her. And it was like, wow, this is actually working when I put myself out there.
It is. It does. It's like, that's the thing, because everybody wants to connect with people who are in their like full and true selves. It's like, that is so magnetic. When someone is like being their full self, it's so magnetic.
Yeah.
And when they're not, it's like so uncomfortable, to be around. And so I just think it's like, there's, I can't say there's no reason not to. Like, there are always the practical concerns, and it's money, and it's like all the things that we that we have to contend with, and those are real, and I don't deny that, you know, and I think there's of course inherent privilege in being able to like make a big pivot. But
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, you know, for most people there's a way.
Yeah.
And you know, you can find that way, and it may require certain sacrifices, and it may be really scary, and it may take a minute, you know, but it can be done, and it's so worth it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, my last question. What does making it mean to you now versus when you were younger? So, yeah, what does success look like to you now?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, when I was younger, it was like, I'm going to like, you know, it's so funny. I remember I always think about this. When I was in college, there was a kid I went to college with who was like, I guess even then he was like starting to direct commercials. Is that possible? I don't know. He was young,
I
but he was. And I remember like sitting in the dining hall with him one day, and someone said to him, like, "Hey, do you think you'll ever be happy?" And he was like, "Yeah, when I'm fucking supermodels and driving a Ferrari." And I was like, he meant it. Like that was the truth for him. It's
Yeah.
like that is really what he was moving toward. And I think that's actually where he like that is where he moved toward. You know, like I think that became his
Yeah.
reality. And I that was not exactly my ambition, but I feel like it was something like equally sort of vapid. It was like, you know, I'm going to win an Oscar
Yeah.
by the time I'm 30 or like some, you know, dumb shit like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that I think I had ideas around status and like wanting people to acknowledge me in a certain way and stuff like that. And now it's like I just want people to experience my stories. Like I
Yeah.
just want like my stories to be told. And
Yeah.
I also want all the other stuff. Like I would be lying to say like I don't want money and I don't want awards and I don't want people to respect me. Of course I do, but it's like that is like
Mm-hmm.
the sort of byproduct of the main thing. Like when I really wake up every morning, it's like, how can I get this story in the world? How can I share this idea that I have? How can I get people to experience these characters and these tales that I'm weaving on the page? Like that's really what I want. Like I love the feeling of someone
Yeah.
reading my work and like being, I mean, the response to that New Yorker piece was just like, I didn't really expect it, but it was like,
Mm-hmm.
it was everything to me to get the emails and messages just like with people being like, I was so moved, you know, like I
Oh,
cried
yeah.
or me too, like my dad also, or I, you know, just the connection that people had to something that I wrote, like it chokes me up right now to say it. It really
Yeah.
affected me. And it was like, that's all that it's about, you know?
Yes.
So that's making it. For me, making it is literally making it. It's like just making the things and like hopefully having an audience experience them. Like that's what I'm after.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful and brilliant. And yeah, I think touching lives with our stories, whether, I do a lot of comedy. So it's like, if it means I make them
Yes. Oh
laugh
my
and
God.
that's it, part of their healing journey. Oh, that makes me so happy.
That's like got to be the best feeling ever to make people laugh for a living. Like, oh, that must feel so good.
Yeah. Even just in my house.
Yeah. No, that's like gold.
Yeah. If I can make my kids laugh, oh, I'm so happy.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
me too. But especially because I feel like it's like they don't think of me as, you know, like I'm so
Yeah.
mom mode 90% of the time. So it's like if I do something weird and funny, it's like such an anomaly for them. It's
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, dad is the funny one in our house, according to them. And I'm like, really? Oh, okay.
I'm a professional comedian.
No, this is great. Emily, it's been so nice talking to you and getting to know you.
Oh,
I feel like we just scratched the surface, but
well, I'm just honored
yeah,
to be here, and thank you so much. And I'm excited to listen to more of your episodes, and it's wonderful that you're doing this. I think it's like we started out by saying, like there's so much to share, and we need each other's voices. We really do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important for people to know that there's like artists and people who are doing like really good, important, and interesting work out there that aren't plastered across their television
Totally.
screens or their movie screens. And there's this whole other side of it where there's, they might be on their television screen for 5 minutes,
Right.
but their work is still important. And, in the meantime, they're also doing all this other stuff behind the scenes, or like the writers who are actually coming up with the stories. And then just hearing people's journeys. We talked about the hero journey, but it is like hearing how people kind of come back to finding themselves and finding their voice through their art. And sometimes there's an event, a catalyst that makes it happen. And sometimes it's just, I think, growing up.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
Or just, it's like, I've been really inspired by a lot of the awards winners this year, right? Jennifer Coolidge and Michelle Yeoh, and just like being like, okay, these women are like in their 60s and they're like finally getting their due. And I don't know, just it's obvious, but it's like we all have the opportunity to continue doing the work that matters to us, and it may take the world a minute to catch up to us, and that's that may just be the way it goes. Doesn't mean that our work is not valuable.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's great. Well, maybe one day I'll get to have like Key on here or something, because I'm like, that's like the ultimate comeback story. Like, started off as a child actor and then came back later, and 20 years later, I'm like,
it's really
I would love to talk to him.
So moving, and Brendan Fraser. It's like everyone this year, I feel like, was sort of like, oh, okay. Like they're all reminding us that we just have to keep going and like doing the thing, and that's all we can do. We can't, the rest of it is beyond our control. It just is.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Just keep going, keep making your thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And where can people follow you or learn more about your work and your stuff?
Yeah, Instagram, Emily Ziff Griffin is my Instagram. I have a website, which is emilyziffgriffin.com. I feel like I need to update my website. It's not everything. It just sort of feels, I don't know. But yeah, you can read stuff I've written there, and my workshop and all that stuff is there. But yeah, Instagram is kind of my go-to for just like whatever's going on moment to moment in my life, which is probably not that interesting to most people, but that's where it happens.
Awesome. Well, and I'll link everything in the show notes so people can easily access it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode. You can check out Emily on Instagram at Emily Ziff Griffin. You can find information about her book and links to reach her for workshops or one-on-one coaching at her website, emilyziffgriffin.com. And of course, you can always buy her book from Amazon or your favorite bookstore. If you're enjoying the show, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Share the show with your friends, and be sure to follow the show on Instagram at makingitafter40, the number 40, and to catch up on what I'm doing when I'm not podcasting, check out my Instagram at Lisa Rodriguez. Thank you all for listening, and have an excellent week.